You've scrubbed that grout before, on your hands and knees with something that smelled like a swimming pool, and 3 weeks later it looked exactly the same. Maybe a little worse. Maybe you scrubbed so hard the lines turned slightly lighter in some spots and darker in others, and now the floor looks patchy instead of dirty, which is somehow more depressing. You did everything right. You bought the product with the satisfying before and after on the label. You let it sit, you rinsed it, and within a month the gray crept back in like it had never left. That's not a coincidence. That's a design. And I don't mean some dramatic conspiracy. I mean something far more ordinary and far more infuriating. A business model built entirely on the fact that the cleaning products sitting in your cabinet right now are engineered to give you a result that doesn't hold. Not because chemistry doesn't exist to do better. It does. It existed long before any of those products did. But temporary results mean repeat customers, and repeat customers mean a business that keeps running. What I found, and what I'm going to walk you through, costs about $1. Maybe $1.50 if you want the full version of this. It works on ceramic, porcelain, natural stone, sanded grout, unsanded grout, sealed grout that's lost its seal, and grout that's never been sealed once in its life. It doesn't just lift the surface staining, it goes after what's living inside the grout, which is why the result actually holds. We're talking months, not weeks, and the process itself takes about 20 minutes of active effort. The rest is just waiting. But before we get into the method, you need to understand why the thing that actually works isn't on any store shelf with a big marketing budget behind it. Because once you see that part clearly, the rest makes complete sense. There's a reason the grout cleaning aisle at any hardware store has 47 products on it, and not one of them mentions how long the results actually last. Read the back of any of those bottles. They'll tell you what it smells like. They'll tell you it penetrates deep. They'll use words like professional strength and maximum power and advanced formula. What they will not tell you, what none of them will commit to in writing, is how long the clean lasts before you need to buy the product again. That's not an accident. That's the most carefully omitted piece of information in the household cleaning industry. Here's the economics of it. The grout cleaning market, just grout specifically, is a subset of the broader tile and surface care category, which generates somewhere in the neighborhood of $4 billion annually in the United States alone. The brands that dominate that market aren't selling you a solution. They're selling you a ritual. You buy it, you use it, it wears off, you buy it again. That cycle is the product. The liquid in the bottle is just the delivery mechanism. And this model works because most people don't know what's actually going on inside grout when it gets dirty. They assume it's a surface problem, something settled on top, something you wipe away. So they buy a product designed for surface problems. It addresses the surface. And when the surface gets dirty again because the underlying issue was never touched, they buy the product again. The industry doesn't need customers to fail. It just needs them to not fully succeed. Here's what genuinely got under my skin when I started researching this. The formula that actually handles grout at the level that makes results last, the one that goes after the mold spores, and bacteria embedded in the porous structure of the grout itself, was widely understood by householders and cleaning professionals, decades before the modern cleaning industry decided what products were going to be on shelves and which approaches were going to get marketing budgets. The compound at the core of it is cheap, stable, safe, and it works better than anything in an aerosol can. It just doesn't lend itself to a monthly repeat purchase. And that's where the trail goes cold. Before the commercial cleaning industry existed as we know it, before the aerosol can, before the color-coded spray bottle, before the celebrity-endorsed surface wipe, households across America maintained their tile and grout work with a compound that cost almost nothing and needed to be applied maybe twice a year. This wasn't folk wisdom or guesswork. It was chemistry that had been proven out through actual use across generations, the kind of knowledge that got passed through households because it worked reliably, not because an advertising campaign told people to trust it. In the 1930s and into the 1940s, the domestic science movement, which sounds quaint now, but was a serious field of household chemistry education taught in schools and documented extensively in women's magazines and university extension publications, had documented cleaning methods for porous stone and ceramic tile that relied on oxidizing compounds. These were the same compounds being used in industrial laundry operations, in hospital sanitation, and in food processing facilities, because they were effective and they left no harmful residue. The approach was understood well enough that the Department of Agriculture was publishing guidance on it for home use. What happened in the post-war period changed everything. The chemical industry boom of the late 1940s and 1950s produced a generation of synthetic surfactants and chlorine-based cleaners that were cheap to manufacture, easy to bottle, and had a dramatic sensory effect. Strong smell, visible foaming, fast surface results. These products weren't necessarily better at solving the underlying problem, but they were better at feeling like they were solving it. which turned out to matter more for retail sales. The older compound-based approaches got crowded out, not because they were discontinued by any decree, but because they didn't have a corporate champion willing to put marketing money behind them. They were too cheap. The margin wasn't there. The technique quietly moved into the background. You can still find references to it in old homeowner manuals, in pre-1955 household chemistry guides, in the kind of printed pamphlets that show up in estate sale boxes. And the compound itself, we'll get to exactly what it is shortly, never went anywhere. It's still made, still sold, still available, still effective. It just doesn't have a commercial spokesperson. Here's what's actually happening inside Grout that nobody in the cleaning product world wants to explain clearly. Because once you understand it, you stop buying their products. Grout is a porous material. Even sealed grout has some degree of permeability. The seal degrades, it gets worn by foot traffic and cleaning friction. And over time, moisture finds its way in. When moisture gets into grout, it carries with it everything that's in the moisture. Mineral deposits from hard water, organic matter, from soap residue, airborne particles, and most importantly, the biological stuff, mold spores, mildew, bacteria. These don't sit on top of the grout. They colonize inside it. They root into the porous structure and establish themselves at a depth that a surface spray can't reach. When you spray a conventional cleaner on dirty grout and scrub, you're addressing the top layer. You're lifting the staining that's visible. And it looks clean. It looks dramatically clean sometimes, especially right after you rinse it. But the biological colonization that's embedded in the grout itself, the mold and mildew that's actually causing the ongoing discoloration, it's still there. It's just temporarily buried under a cleaner surface. And within a few weeks, often sooner in humid environments, it works its way back up. The surface gets dirty again, you buy the spray again. The chlorine bleach-based products that dominate the market do actually kill surface mold and mildew. That's real. Chlorine is genuinely effective at that. But here's the problem. Chlorine bleach is reactive and unstable. It breaks down quickly. It doesn't penetrate deeply into porous grout structure because it's doing chemistry at the surface level, consuming itself in the reaction. The kill zone is shallow, and bleach does something else that nobody talks about on the label. Over repeated use, it can actually degrade the grout binder, making the surface slightly more porous with each application, which means the next round of contamination takes hold faster and deeper than the last one. Think about what that means for a business model. Every time you use the product, it creates conditions that make you need to use the product sooner next time. It's not a solution. It's a subscription you never signed up for. The compound that actually works goes after this differently. Instead of a surface reactive chlorine chemistry, it releases oxygen. And oxygen, nascent oxygen specifically, the highly reactive atomic form that gets released during decomposition of certain compounds, penetrates into porous materials and oxidizes organic matter throughout the grout's depth, not just on top. It kills mold and mildew at the root level, breaks apart the cell structure so it can't regenerate from what's left behind, and it does this without degrading the grout binder. In fact, the byproducts of the reaction are essentially water and a small amount of soda ash, both completely inert, both things that rinse away clean. The difference in result duration is significant. Surface treatments can last anywhere from a few days to a few weeks before visible regrowth starts. Oxygen-based deep treatment, done properly, holds for 3 to 6 months in a bathroom with normal use. In lower humidity applications, kitchen tile, entryway floors, outdoor tile, even longer. The compound at the center of this is something you can buy in the cleaning supply section of most grocery stores, hardware stores, or online for well under $2. It's called sodium percarbonate. Some people know it by the brand name OxyClean, which contains it as the active ingredient. But if you buy straight sodium percarbonate, which is sometimes labeled as oxygen bleach or percarbonate powder, you're paying roughly $1 per pound. And a pound of it will handle multiple treatments with enough left over to clean a small bathroom 3 or 4 times. This is different from regular baking soda. Different from washing soda, though washing soda is part of this. Sodium percarbonate is a compound of sodium carbonate and hydrogen peroxide that's stable in dry form and activates when it hits water, releasing that nascent oxygen we just talked about. It's what laundry pre-soak products use to lift stains that detergent alone can't touch. It's what hospitals use for surface disinfection in situations where chlorine residue is a concern. And it's what you're going to use on your grout. Here's the method, exactly as I've tested it and refined it. You need warm water. Not hot, not cold. Hot water accelerates the breakdown of the compound too fast before it can penetrate. Cold water slows the activation. You want something around body temperature, comfortable to put your hand in. For every cup of water, you're adding 2 tablespoons of sodium percarbonate. Stir it until it fully dissolves. It should go from cloudy to mostly clear within about 30 seconds. What you have now is an active oxygen solution, and it starts working the moment you make it, so don't mix it in advance and let it sit. Apply it directly to the grout lines. You can use a spray bottle if you mixed a larger batch, or you can apply it with an old toothbrush if you're working a small area. Either way, the goal is to get the solution into the grout, not just on the tile surface. For heavily stained grout, apply, let it sit for 10 minutes, apply a second coat, let that sit another 10 minutes. The total dwell time you're aiming for is 15 to 20 minutes. You'll notice the solution fizzing slightly on contact. That's the oxygen releasing. That's the reaction working. After the dwell time, use a stiff-bristled grout brush, not a toothbrush. For this part, something with a bit more mechanical force behind it, and scrub the grout lines in short back-and-forth passes. You're not trying to scrub hard enough to damage anything. The chemistry has already done most of the work. You're just helping the loosened material lift out. Rinse thoroughly with clean water. Don't leave residue sitting. For very dark staining, grout that's been neglected for years, or grout in a high humidity environment that's developed significant mold penetration, you can do a second full treatment the following day. Most grout, in my experience, shows dramatic results after the first treatment. We're talking genuinely startling results, the kind that make you wonder why you've been buying the spray bottle stuff for years. Total cost for this process on an average-sized bathroom floor, somewhere between 75 cents and $1.20, depending on where you source your sodium percarbonate and how much grout you're treating. Cleaning alone is only half of what makes this last, and this is the part that every overpriced professional service either skips or charges you a separate fee for. After you've done the cleaning process and given it 24 hours to fully dry, you need to seal the grout. This step is what separates a result that holds for months from a result that holds for weeks. The seal is the reason the cleaning works as long as it does, because it closes off the porous surface that allows mold and moisture to reestablish themselves. Grout sealer is not expensive. A bottle of penetrating grout sealer, the kind that soaks into the grout rather than coating the surface, runs between $8 and $15 and handles a typical bathroom 2 or 3 times over. Apply it with a small foam brush or a cotton applicator along the grout lines, wipe away any excess that gets on the tile before it dries, and give it 24 hours before the floor sees any moisture. That's it. The reason this matters specifically after an oxygen cleaning treatment versus sealing over grout you've only surface cleaned is that the oxygen treatment opens up the pores as it works, flushing out the contamination that was embedded in them. When you then seal that cleaned, open-pored grout, the sealer penetrates deeper and bonds more completely than it would over grout that still has organic material sitting in its pores. You're sealing clean material. The result is a seal that actually holds up to normal use rather than degrading in a few months. Professionals who do grout restoration and charge $300 to $500 for a bathroom, sometimes more, are essentially doing a version of this exact process. The chemistry they use is often industrial-grade sodium percarbonate, or a close relative. The sealant they apply afterward is the same product available at any hardware store. The margin in that service isn't in the materials or the technique. It's in the fact that most people don't know the technique, and the learning curve appears steeper than it actually is. The total cost for the full process, cleaning compound plus sealer, comes in around $10 to $12 for a typical bathroom. The professional quote for the same result, $300 to $500. The actual outcome, largely identical, with the DIY version often holding longer because you're doing it with care for your own space, rather than trying to turn over 5 jobs in a day. 3 weeks after doing this in my own laundry room, which had grout that I'd written off as simply permanent gray, the kind of gray that makes you assume tile just ages that way. The grout looked the way it did when the house was built. I genuinely wasn't expecting that. I expected improvement. I expected the results I'd trained myself to expect from cleaning products, which is noticeable but temporary, satisfying for about 10 days, then familiar disappointment. What I got instead was grout that, 6 months later, still looks clean. Not just maintained, actually clean, visibly light, the same result you'd pay a professional for and be pleased with. The sodium percarbonate is the thing. That's what changes the outcome, and the seal is what keeps the outcome from disappearing in a month. Together, the 2 steps take an afternoon and cost less than a pizza. Apart from each other, you get either a temporary result or seal on top of dirty grout, which doesn't hold either. If you're going to do one thing with this information before tomorrow, find sodium percarbonate. Grocery store cleaning aisle, hardware store, online, you'll find it. Check the label to confirm it's the active ingredient, not just an ingredient. Mix it warm, apply it to the grout, let chemistry do the work you've been paying a spray bottle not to do. The knowledge that actually solves these problems tends to be old, cheap, and not on the shelf with the big label and the satisfying smell. That pattern shows up over and over once you start looking for it. If seeing more of these overlooked fixes matters to you, the methods that existed before the marketing budgets decided what you should know, subscribe and you'll catch the next one. And if you've already tried oxygen bleach on your grout, or you've got a different technique that's held up over time. Drop it in the comments.